Well, right out of college, the first thing I ever really led was I was a youth pastor at a brand new church, so there hadn't been a youth pastor before, and I really didn't know how to build a youth ministry. I remember asking my pastor, what is success? And he said, I don't know. I'll tell you if you do it. So I did my best to try to figure out, what am I trying to build here? And over those first few years, I remember we began, our church would meet in a middle school we rented, and my youth ministry consisted of a circle of about 4 high school kids sitting around in a hallway, none of whom wanted to be there. Me included. None of us wanted to be there, and yet here we were. But by the grace of God, we were able to grow to about 15, 20 students, and we would move to the choir room. And then by the grace of God, we grew to about 50, 60 students and moved to the lunchroom. And at that point, we had hit critical mass that we started to build a band of high school students, and we're trying to figure out how to play instruments and how to sing worship songs and have people do announcements. And we were trying to build the structure of a youth ministry. And I remember there was one particular Sunday that I was standing in the back by the sound booth, watching the band and kind of getting ready for my message. And as I was doing that, there were 2 college-age guys sitting right in front of me at the back of the room, which I don't even know how they got there. They weren't even supposed to be there. But there they were, and I was standing behind them, so I overheard their conversation. And these 2 young college guys were just critiquing everything they saw. They were critiquing our slides and the artwork on them, which was pretty primitive, and the lack of responsiveness by our PowerPoint guy. And they were commenting on the band, their voices, that the drummer couldn't find the beat, and things that were true, but they were just going on with all these critiques of our ministry. And I remember as I sat there listening to them, I was like, you know what? They're right in their assessment, and there's a lot more things that are problematic around here they don't even know about. I said, but as I looked at them, I remember it struck me because I had been them about 2 years before. I was about 2 years out of college. And I remember sitting in the back of ministries or restaurants or businesses and just critiquing like a connoisseur, like, well, I like their leadership, but it has a nutty woody flavor. Just kind of commenting. And I thought, you know what? To be a critic is so easy. It is so much harder to try to construct something. And I'd always heard that, but it was the first time I really felt that because I was trying to build something. And it just struck me, it is so much easier to belittle something than it is to build something. So much easier to critique a movie than to make one. So much easier to critique a restaurant than to run one. So much easier to critique a leader than to lead something. And yet for many of us in this city, God has called us to lead. And so we jumped into this series about leadership lessons from the life of Solomon. The king that God appointed to lead the people of God in the Old Testament to the heights of their success. And we've said we want to learn from him in his best days to be like him. And we want to learn from him in his worst days to avoid his mistakes. But before we jump into it, as we look at the ascension of Solomon in this passage, the first steps of a successful successor, I want to warn you, my goal is not to make you a more refined critic. Because the temptation will be for you to hear this and go like, my boss should take a few notes here. Should send this to someone who's up on the hill. That's not my goal, is to refine your palate as a critic. I'm talking to you about you, right? Because all of us have been made leaders. Some of you here in the government, some of you here in businesses, even you just leader of your family or your own personal life or resources. I want to help you be a better leader as we look at this leader in the Old Testament. Amen? So as we begin, verse 1 gives us a summary statement of how his kingdom started. And what's great about the summary statement is his dad, King David, prayed over him in 1 Chronicles 22 and 28 and 29. You can read about it later. He prays for him a lot. But the essential prayers of David were really 3 things. Son, I want you to be strong and courageous to do what's right, because it takes strength and courage to do what's right. And may the Lord be with you, and may the Lord strengthen you, and you be great. And then as Solomon takes over, we see all of David's prayers are answered, his hopes realized. It says Solomon, the son of David, established himself in his kingdom. That word established in Hebrew is the same word as be strong and courageous. He did it. And the Lord his God was with him, and the Lord made him exceedingly great. Great start. All of David, the great king's hopes for his son are happening. Solomon's got a solid start as a successor. And so we need to look at, what did he do? How did this happen? If that summarizes his beginning, what were the seeds of his greatness? What are the first steps of a successful king? And that's what we see in what follows. We'll have three. And the first one comes in this first paragraph. You see it in verse 2. It says, Solomon spoke to all of Israel. That's the entire nation. And then it breaks it down to the commanders of thousands and of hundreds. That's to the military leaders. And to the judges and to all the leaders in Israel, down to the heads of the fathers' houses. These are the various levels of civic leadership. So he takes his military and his civic leaders and he brings them all together. And in verse 3, it says, and Solomon and all this assembly with him went to the high place that was at Gibeon, for the tent of meeting of God, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, had made in the wilderness, was there. But David had brought the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim to the place that David had prepared for it. He had pitched the tent in Jerusalem. Moreover, the bronze altar that Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, had made was there before the tabernacle of the Lord. And Solomon and the assembly sought it out, and Solomon went up there to that bronze altar before the Lord, which was at the tent of meeting, and he offered 1,000 burnt offerings on it. So let's get a running start at our first point here, but you got to back up because there's some name dropping in here that's important. The first one was of Moses, the great leader of this fledgling nation. If you recall Moses, he led the people of God out of slavery in Egypt through the wilderness to the promised land. And when he did that, really, as he led the people out of slavery, they were just a mob of formerly enslaved people. And when they got out into the wilderness, Moses was the first leader that helped coalesce this mob of people into a fledgling nation. And the way he did it was he ascended Mount Sinai and he met with God. And God issued him the law, the 10 commandments. Remember that he came back down. And these commandments gave some structure and stability to the society. This is how we will treat one another. This is how we'll care for one another. This is how we'll build a society that allows us all to flourish. That's why Moses is on the top of our Supreme Court right now, and why his face is looking at whoever speaks in the House on the Congress, because Moses is the lawgiver who gave us structure and stability for a thriving society. And they took that law, those 10 commandments, and they put it in a box called an ark. Covered it in gold, it looked real nice. And they put a lid on it called the mercy seat. And what they would do, and this was symbolic, as they began to journey through the desert, that box with the law of God went before the people. They would carry it before the people, and the sort of symbolism of that was, our God is leading us where he wants us to go. We follow the Lord. And then when they would stop and camp, they would take that altar and put it, or that ark, and put it in the center, and they would camp all around it. And the symbolism there was, our God dwells in the midst of us. He's close to us, and we can know him. And yet, the idea there was, hey, this ark contains the holiness of God etched into stone, and none of us have really been able to keep it. If this is the full justice of God, we have not kept it. And so when they would put that ark in the center of the people, they would cover it with a tent, the tabernacle. We've got a picture of it up here from Sunday school class. There you go. That's actually a photo from back in the day. It's amazing. The tent wasn't cut out like that, and so you can see it, but they would have a tent, and in the back of the tent was that little room. They called it the Holy of Holies. That God is holy, here's his holy law, and because no one's kept that law, no one can enter that room. And so here it is to dwell in the midst of God, and yet we're kept on the outside of the tent. And yet there in front of the tent was an altar. And on that altar, they would sacrifice an animal. It wasn't like the pagans around them who would offer sacrifices to feed the gods as their slaves. That was not how this was organized. This was, the idea is, I have violated God's law, so I can't be close to him. And yet if someone innocent who's done none wrong offers their life, they can pay the debt of my transgression against the law. And so they would sacrifice not a person, but a lamb as a symbol. And once a year, the priest would put the blood on that lid, the top of the altar, to say, like, this has covered our violation of the law so that we can know God and have a relationship with him. And so God meets us at the seat of mercy because of the sacrifice at the altar. And so we've got the ark, the justice of God, a high moral standard, but we've got the altar, a place of forgiveness and mercy so I can really know God. And they would bring that all together in the tent. And that's kind of how it would work as they led through the people. So Moses led them up to the edge of the land. He did not get to take them in. Joshua did. Joshua led them in the land, kind of dropped these articles off at Gibeon, and then the judges took over. If you've read the book of Judges, it's a bit of a bumpy ride for the people of God. And Saul was not a good leader either. But then David becomes king, and we read about David's first act as king in 1 Chronicles 13. And what's wild is the language is almost exact parallel to what we just read about Solomon. That when David became king in 1 Chronicles 13, it says David consulted with the commanders of thousands and of hundreds, with every leader. And he said, let us bring the ark of God to us, for we did not seek it in the days of Saul. And all the assembly agreed to do so, for the thing was right in the eyes of the people. David became king, and he said, hey, we need to go get the ark, the law of God, and we need to bring it back into the center of the people where it's supposed to be. And so David did that, and it was the right thing for him to do. He was the one establishing the kingdom, subduing their enemies, giving them a safe place to live, capturing the city of Jerusalem. And he said, hey, we need to solidify the people. Let's do it around the ark. But then he also knew from Deuteronomy, a day would come where they had peace from their enemies, and they were meant to take the ark and the altar and the tabernacle, bring it together and build a solid, firm, final place called the temple where we could meet with God. And David said, after he got peace, I want to do that. And God told him, no, you were the man of blood who fought wars. It's your successor who will build the temple. And so David has to drop it off. And you see, God says, no, I got a different kind of leader. I want to lead my people into the next stage. So we're about to get to the first point of your leadership, but I just want you to make a note on that. Betsy Atkins wrote an article for Forbes last year on CEO archetypes. And her thesis was different stages in the life of a company require different types of CEOs. She said there's the visionary founder. We all know that. The entrepreneurial drive, the strong vision, willingness to take risks. But that kind of person, after they build a company, can sometimes have trouble scaling it or figuring out how to work in a structured environment. And so she said often who takes over next is what she calls the professional. That's the person who steps in where the founders may falter. They have operational expertise that can take a company's vision and execute it on a grander scale. Examples would be Steve Jobs and Tim Cook. Steve Jobs, the visionary. Let's put music on a phone, kind of really do something amazing. And Tim Cook takes over. He's not the same kind of CEO, but Apple has quadrupled their revenues under Tim Cook. And so different kinds of leaders for different kinds of days. It's interesting in the book Tribe by Sebastian Junger, he talks about Native American tribes where they had a war leader and a peace leader because they realized if you're at war, the peace leader will mess it up. But if you're at peace, the war leader will mess it up. So the idea is different kind of leaders for different kinds of days, different temperaments in the middle of different times. So leadership is not a temperament. It's not a type of personality. God will put different kinds of people in leadership at different moments for different reasons. David, you're a fighter. Solomon's a builder. And yet, even though their temperaments are different, the writer of Chronicles parallels their first steps as king to show you their temperaments are different, their times are different, but their values are the same. And so this principle applies for all different kinds of leaders. What's the value you see in David and in Solomon? David, as he takes his first step, says we must go to the ark to worship God. Solomon, for his step, says we must go to the altar to worship God. Let's bring together these pieces of ark and altar, but their first priority for both men is our first point of a successful leader. A successful leader submits to a sovereign Lord. My first step as king to acknowledge that I am not the ultimate king, that there is a king over kings, and I submit to him. You want a leader like this. You don't want a leader who believes that all truth and righteousness and morality and justice is determined by their whims on a given day. You want a leader over you who has a sense of authority over them. It says, I am here for a season as a steward of the people God has entrusted to my care, whether they be in a religious organization or not. You don't want someone who believes the earth rotates around them. And so one of the healthiest leaders is the one who admits, hey, I'm in charge, but I'm not ultimately in charge. And a successful leader submits themselves to a sovereign king. Moses had to do it. David had to do it. Now it's Solomon's time. What's interesting is Solomon's about 20 at this time. Every new generation has to decide what God they will serve. What structure will they give to society? And here Solomon, the young leader, says we need a standard to unite around. We will unite around God, not my charisma. And that's healthy. Jonathan Haidt is an atheist, social scientist, has studied how technology is affecting us, wrote that book that's done very well recently called The Anxious Generation. And he talked about how, in the 90s, we thought the internet was going to unite us all. What a wonderful place for us all to share ideas and grow together. Whoops, turns out that's not true. What happens is it's fractured us more than ever. We can all go to our little silos to hear only what we want to hear. And so now what we hear about and what version of the truth is so far apart, it's like we're all speaking different languages. We're fracturing as a society. And as Jonathan Haidt sees this, he says, the best I can discern is the phone-based life produces spiritual degradation, which he uses that term with trepidation because he says, I'm an atheist, but I don't have any other words to say, but we've been degraded spiritually. And so when he says, so how do we flourish as a society? He says, I think what we need is a shared sacredness. People don't unite around unity. They need something to unite around. And he wrote in his observation, the strongest and most satisfying communities come into being when something lifts the people out of the lower level so they have a powerful collective experience. They enter the realm of the sacred. Example, like the Christians do when they gather together and sing. That's his example. That if we're going to cohere, we need something greater than us that unifies us. And that's what Solomon gets right. We're not going to unite around me, we're going to unite around him. Because I may rule all of this, but I don't rule all of this. Someone else made me and I'm accountable to him. And so the first steps of a sovereign king is to say, I am not the end all be all, but I am a king under the King of Kings and I will acknowledge him. Now, let me dangerously step into the world of politics for a moment. I don't talk a lot about it because you guys, most of you anyway, know more about it than me, but I'll say this. There's a debate about should religion and politics mix together at all? And the reality is they always have, if you look through human history, because politics is about how do we structure a society and religion is about how human beings should treat each other. So there's significant overlap, right? And yet, how do we understand how these things are supposed to relate? How does spirituality connect to the secular arena, some would say? And for some people, they go, oh, I know, God should be outside of any discussion of the structure of society. I know where God is. He is a relic to be cast out. He has no place in the leadership of a country or a company. He has been invoked in the past as a tool of exploitation. He's the relic of a barbarian day. The religious are like Gary Oldman in the book of Eli, if you recall that, where he wanted the Bible and he says, I need the book so I can use it to manipulate the people. And you're like, no one just comes out and says it, Gary, but yes, there are people who do that. And so there's folks that are scared of that and say, hey, I don't want that. So God in the arena of leadership, I got a place for him out. Cast him out. He's a relic of a bygone day, right? The problem with that view that many are struggling with now is if you cast God out, then where do your standards of right and wrong come from? By what standards do we judge what is good or bad? And a couple decades ago, I remember people saying, look, it's easy. The standards are, we all know what is true and just and right and beautiful. Let's just do those things. It's obvious. Turns out that's not true. We can't agree on hardly anything. We can't agree on what a man or a woman is. And yet it's shaping our policies. And you go, whoops, no, we don't have this common, obvious tool to judge what is right and what is wrong. And so if you say God is on the outside of this, from whence human rights has been a major issue in the philosophical world today. If I deny the existence of a God and say we can build structure without him, where do human rights come from? Upon what basis do you say, hey, the rape and enslavement of women is wrong? Well, if you don't believe there's a God who gives structure to society, you can't say it's ultimately wrong. You can say, I don't prefer it, or you can say, hey, where does that statement come from? You say, well, maybe it comes from the person who's in power or an elite circle that decides that's wrong. Or maybe it comes by vote. The nation votes that's wrong and thus it's wrong. But that gives you no basis by which to judge some other country. If you say, no, like our king or our people all voted and we believe that slavery and exploitation of women is wrong, you can't say it's wrong for that nation because they didn't vote that. They don't believe that. But if you want to be able to say, no, the exploitation of women is wrong, and it's always wrong, and I don't care if you voted for it or not. You have to invoke a standard above all of humanity in all nations and powers and governments. Where did you get that standard from? It has to come from someone higher than you. This is the issue with that view that wants God outside of society. Where do we get the sense that human beings have dignity and human beings have value, right? Ben Shapiro talked to Bill Maher about this recently. It was a fascinating conversation. You've got a Jewish man and an atheist man discussing. And at one point, Ben Shapiro, the Jewish man, says, Bill, you and I agree on morality about, I don't know, maybe 87% of the time. Why do you think that is? Me as a Jew, you as an atheist, why is our morality about 87% the same? And Bill said, I don't know. And Ben Shapiro said, I'll tell you why. Because we probably grew up minutes from each other in a nation formed by Christianity. And so you think you just showed up with morality because you assumed it. He says, you were born on moral third base, which I don't think Bill Maher wanted to believe, but it really is true, right? Tom Holland has wrestled with this in Dominion. He said, I didn't want Christianity to be true, and yet if I look at all the things I hold dear about the dignity of humanity, the rights of the poor, these did not come out of the air, and they didn't come from ancient societies. They came from Jesus of Nazareth. Eric Weinstein was recently on the Diary of a CEO. Two CEOs discussing it. Eric Weinstein, who's an atheist, PhD of mathematics at Harvard, said to the CEO leading the Diary of CEO, here's my advice for you, go to church. And the CEO said, how can you say that? You're an atheist. And he was like, yeah, you don't have to believe it, but you are the heir of a structure that has allowed for human flourishing. You should show up. Doesn't matter if you don't believe it, which I think it does matter if you don't believe it, but it's fascinating that these men are looking and saying, you know what? Acknowledging a God and the structure he built for humanity to flourish has made sense. We need this. And so there's one side that says we don't need God. He belongs outside as a relic of the past. Yet there's another side in politics that say, no, God belongs, but I'll tell you where he belongs. I have a place for God in my platform. Turns out he agrees with me wholeheartedly on everything, and it's great. And I'm gonna kind of use God as a tool to advance my agenda, to get the vote of the people who like him, et cetera. So God is not a relic to be tossed out, he's a tool to be used for my agenda and my purposes, right? And the Bible says no. God is not a relic to be tossed out. He's not a tool to be used. He is a king to bow the knee to. He is someone to say, no, I am not the end of all things. There is a king over all kings, and he's given us structure for society that allows us to flourish. Like Francis Schaeffer talked about years ago, the finite needs an infinite reference point. We have to have doxology that gives us our morality. Ethics start at the altar. And so for a true nation, and it's true for you individually. So let me do this before we move on to point two, which will go faster. Some of you have been listening to this and you go, yeah, tell that to this congressperson, tell that to that leader, tell that to, remember what we said at the beginning? I'm talking to you about you, okay? Where is God in your decision making? How do you approach his world? Do you functionally say, you know what, I'll come to church and tip my hat to religion, but functionally, God's a relic of a bygone day. So God, you stay over there, leave my wallet, my bedroom, and my decisions alone. I decide. I don't need your structure in my life. Or do you say, hey, I'm just here to get blessed. I got a plan, I got a purpose for my kingdom, power, and glory. And God, I need you to use your power to get on my program to get me where I want to be. And I want to use God as a tool to get where I want. Or do you say, no, somebody made all this and it's not me. And he made me on purpose for a purpose, and I want to bow my knee to him for his glory and our good. That's what a good king does. And the nation flourishes under a sovereign king who submits to the sovereign king. You see it? All right, second step of a successful king comes that night. It's interesting when you watch somebody really get a mantle of leadership on their shoulders. So many young people are excited to lead. Here's 20-year-old Solomon about to lead the nation. But when it really does finally land on his shoulders, what his dad, David, prophesied is true. He gets scared. It's scary to lead at a high level. And yet a fascinating moment occurs that night. It says in verse 7, in that night, God appeared to Solomon and said to him, ask what I shall give to you. God comes to him with 4 words in Hebrew. It's really, ask what I'll give to you. What do you want? God offers him a blank check. which is an interesting thing. What would you say if God did that to you? Right? What do you want right now? What do you want? If I told you to turn to your friend and say, what are you praying for right now? What are you hoping for right now? What are you believing for right now? What do you want? I would bet for most of us, we would say a change in our circumstances. Right? I mean, you wouldn't say it that way, but you would say, man, what do you want right now? You'd say, I just need to get into that school, man. Or I just need to get out of school. Or I just need a job. Or man, I need a raise. I need that person to notice me. I need that person to get fired. I need some money. I need a girlfriend. I need a nap. We would say different things we need, but all of us would say a change in circumstance, right? That's if I had all the power in the world, if I ruled the world. Right? Nas said I would free all my sons. Right? In Forney, Texas, they made 11-year-old Caroline Gonzalez mayor for a day. And they said, what do you want to do, Caroline? And she said, Main Street is now Justin Bieber Way. And it was true, right? What would you want? I asked my kids this. We were reading through Kings and Chronicles last year in our breakfast devotions. And I said, if God offered you a blank check like that, what would you say? And my oldest daughter, without hesitation, said, no phones. She doesn't even own one. She's just seeing what it does to her friendship group. She got a front row seat. And she says, I would pray no phones. What would you pray for? What are you praying for now? The dangerous thing about praying for a change of circumstances is they just keep changing. The other dangerous thing is it betrays a false belief. If I could just get in the right circumstances, I'd be happy. But if you believe that, then the wealthy, famous, beautiful people in the world should be the happiest people on the planet. So the happiest cities in the world are LA, D.C., and New York. No? Huh. What happened? We have the capacity to mess up even ideal circumstances. So I could change your circumstances. I could give you money, but money flies away. I could give you beauty, but it fades. I could give you health, but someone could T-bone you tomorrow because they're on their phone while driving, right? I could give you beauty, but your hair will begin to fall out. It just does, right? Take my word for it. So Solomon does something fascinating. Solomon doesn't pray for a change in circumstances. He prays for the skill to navigate any circumstances. Notice what he does. He said, you know what I want? Wisdom, chokmah in Hebrew. Do you know what that is? It's the word skill. It's used in Exodus for someone that knows how to weave garments. It means I understand this material and I know how to work with it. It's used of Bezalel, who knew how to manage metal. I understand metal and I know how to work with it to form it into an ark. It's someone that says, I understand how the world works and I understand how to work within it. It's competency in the complexities of life. It's the skill of living. But notice Solomon says, give me the skill to succeed in any circumstance, but not just for my kingdom, my power, and my glory. He says, you've given me leadership over your people. And in 1 Kings, he says, and I'm like a child. I don't know what to do. But he says, will you give me the skill to govern them? That means to give justice to them. That means to create an environment where they can thrive and flourish. Give me the skill to serve your people. And God looks at that and goes, man, you could have asked for possessions, wealth, honor, the life of those who hate you. You didn't even ask for long life. I love God's list there. God's like, you know what you could have asked for? You got power. You could have asked for money, fame, revenge, and long life. And what's fascinating is for so many of us, when we get power, those are the things we want. God, I got the power. Give me some money. I want honor. I want people to respect me. I finally have the power to make you pay for crossing me, right? Or I will use technology to live forever. Like this is what we do with money. Steve Martin did a sketch on Saturday Night Live years ago where he said, if I had one wish this Christmas, he said, I would wish for all the children of the world to link hands and sing a song of peace. He said, if I had two wishes, I would pray for all the children of the world to link hands in harmony and peace. And I'd pray for $30 million a month to be given to me. And if I had three wishes, he said, I would pray for all authority over every living being in the universe. Then he prayed for unlimited pleasure for himself. Then he prayed for revenge upon all his enemies. May they die like pigs in hell. And then he was like, well, wait a minute. gathering all the kids together is not very efficient. It's a waste of time. Why would we do that anyway? Forget the stuff about the kids. I'll take the money. No, I'll take the power, then the money, then the pleasure, then the revenge, and then maybe the kids fifth, right? And honestly, for us, look at your prayer life. What are you asking for? Solomon asks for the skill to serve. Lord, help me create an environment where your people can win. And God says, because you asked for that, I will give it to you. I will give you that. The Christian needs this. In that famous allegory of the Pilgrim's Progress, the Christian pilgrim on the journey to life must be taught at the Palace Beautiful by the three sisters of charity, piety, and prudence. And those are old school words for charity is love, piety is righteousness, and prudence is wisdom. Wisdom is not less than morality. You must be moral. And yet you can be moral and be a fool. There's a whole book written about when helping hurts, that you can want to help the poor, but the way you give them money can actually cause more harm than good. That doesn't mean you shouldn't care for the poor. You should have righteousness and love, but you need to add to it wisdom. How do I give in a way that actually promotes human flourishing and doesn't just become a tool for exploitation? A good leader needs all of it. I must have a righteous moral standard, a care for my people, and wisdom to know how to navigate the complexities of life well. And so Solomon asks for this, and God blesses him with that. Solomon will go on to write the book of Proverbs, the book of wisdom, written to young people on their way into government service. So if you've never read the book of Proverbs, I highly recommend it. Even if you don't believe in God, it will make you wise, because it says of God that by wisdom the foundation of the earth was laid, and wisdom all her ways are peace. God structured the world to work in a certain way, and when you match your rhythm with his, you will flourish. All his ways are peace. That is shalom, human flourishing. You follow God's word, even if you don't believe it, you'll thrive. Proverbs 27 says, whoever blesses his neighbor with a loud voice early in the morning, it will be counted as a cursing. That's not moral, that's just smart. You too peppy right when you come in the office, dial it down a shade, okay? You're not helping. Proverbs 25, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. You lack control over your sexual life, your finances, young man, and you wonder why you're not able to build a stable and flourishing life? A lack of self-control will break down the city you're trying to build. So Proverbs says there's a way God built the world, and the wise king says, God, give me the skill to work well within it. You can try defying gravity. Makes a great song, but if you get on the roof and try it, that will be the last thing you do. That's not what the Wright brothers did. They did not defy gravity when they built the plane. They understood deeply how the world works, and they understood how to work within it. And now we all soar among the clouds. You want to be a good leader? You have the wisdom to say, God, I lack wisdom. Give me the skill to serve your people well, to build a structure where they can flourish. How do you get it? Solomon will write in Proverbs, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It starts by acknowledging, I don't know all things, but I know the one that does. This book will make you wise. And the last point we see in that last paragraph, where I won't reread it, but Solomon gathers horsemen, and it says that he imported horses from Egypt and he exported them to the Hittites. And some of you go, why did you even read that? Solomon became an importer-exporter. What is the point of that? Why do we know that? Well, when Solomon submits to a sovereign Lord and asks for the skill to serve, God says, here's the result. He started to figure out, wait a minute, if I buy horses from these guys and sell them to these guys, we got something going here. And he begins to build an economy for this little agrarian society where they start to make money. And after a while, gold and silver become common for everybody. And you see, he builds up the resources to build the temple that God called him to build and to build a kingdom that's flourishing. Solomon, in his wisdom, builds a structure that allows for flourishing, which incidentally is what human beings are meant to do. That was our calling in Genesis 1 and 2. Genesis 1, God builds structure, but not a stifling structure, one in which life can flourish. Then he tells Adam, made in his image me, Adam, cultivate. Take raw materials and arrange it for the maximum flourishing of life. This is what a human being is supposed to do. This is what a good father does. I take my time, money, and energy and create an environment in my home where my wife and children can flourish under God. This is what a good wife does. I take the time, money, energy under my care, and I create an environment where my husband and kids can flourish. This is what a good boss does. I don't take my power and lord it over my people. I look and say, what gifts and skills and abilities has God put into them? So how do I create an environment where they can maximize their abilities to accomplish our shared purposes for the good of society? That's what a human being does. I take my submission to God, the skill he's given me, and I create a structure in which all of life can flourish. That's good leadership. You want to work for a boss like that. This is, how did God build you? Then how do we position you to maximize the gifts he gave you for the most common good, right? Bad leadership tries to exploit you for their own purposes. It's interesting, Wayne Grudem, the theologian, wrote a book several years ago called The Poverty of Nations. And he wrote it because he was in the midst of a Q&A and a young woman stood up from Africa and said, I have a question for you as a theologian. Is Africa cursed by God? He's like, excuse me? And she said, billions have been given in foreign aid, and yet the country continues to struggle with poverty and disease. Are we just cursed by God? And he said, no. But then he didn't really know what to say after that, and that bothered him. And he said, well, why is there a lack of flourishing in so many of these nations? And so he was an economist in his undergrad. He grabbed an economist friend and said, hey, can we put together your understanding of markets and business, my understanding of the word of God and the structure of society under God, and can we just try to figure out what causes some nations to flourish and some to struggle? And he wrote this book, The Poverty of Nations, kind of a parallel to The Wealth of Nations, written generations ago. And he came up originally with 50 points for why nations succeed or fail. It was in a podcast. Now he's up to 78. I won't tell you all 78 of them, but you can read the book. And he looks at economic categories, political commentaries, categories, and cultural values. And yet a common denominator across all of them is we need a kingdom that's moral. He said for many governments, as soon as someone gets in power, they immediately use that power to enrich themselves and their friends. And they exploit and use the people under them to enrich those closest to them. And so they create an environment where it's very difficult for people to flourish. He says, but kingdoms and nations that thrive are ones where the leadership submits to the same law that all people do. And they enforce that law. They give boundaries and structure to society. You can't steal, you can't murder. And yet I want to create an environment where you can use your gifts to build a business to help the economy flourish. If I can create an environment, a structure where life can flourish, we can ascend out of poverty into blessing. It's interesting, Robert Woodbury published an article in 2012 for the American Political Science Review called The Missionary Roots of Liberal Democracy, and he comes to a similar conclusion. He was studying the impact of missionaries on different countries. And he said what he discovered hit him like an atomic bomb, and he wrote this, and I quote, the work of missionaries turns out to be the single largest factor in ensuring the health of nations. He said, what we discovered is areas where the Protestant missionaries have a significant presence in the past are on average more economically developed with comparatively better health, lower infant mortality, lower corruption, greater literacy, higher educational attainment, especially for women, and more robust membership in non-governmental associations. And he concedes there were some racist missionaries and missionaries that were self-centered, but if that were the average effect, we would expect that the places where missionaries had influence would be worse. He said, but we find the opposite. And then he makes an important distinction. He says these positive effects of cultural flourishing only happen where there was a presence of what he calls conversionary Protestant missionaries, which are, it's kind of some terms he made up, but he was trying to say they're missionaries that preach you must be converted, that you're beautiful in the image of God, but you're broken because of sin. And yet the Son of God came and lived the perfect life you could not, died for your sins, that if you put your faith in him, you are changed from the inside out, forgiven, adopted, made God's child to live for his glory and the good of those around you. He says it's people that preached that. And yet he says something interesting here. He says even though missionaries often opposed unjust and destructive practices like opium addiction, slavery, land confiscation, he said most of this type of missionary didn't set out to be political activists, but all this reform came as though through the back door. He said these positive outcomes seem somewhat unintended, which by that he betrays his complete misunderstanding of the gospel. Because Jesus said, if you make the tree good, the fruit will be good. If God changes you from the inside out, you'll produce good in the world. That those who have knelt before the King of Kings lead like a just and righteous king. And so here you see Solomon submits to a sovereign Lord, asks for the skill to serve his people, and he's able to create a structure where there's flourishing. And you and I are meant to do the same. Now, spoiler alert, Solomon will lead them to the heights of glory. And in about 2 weeks, the wheels will come off this bus. Right? That it seems like Solomon's leading them into all the blessings of God. But he takes his eye off the North Star of submitting to the Lord and becomes enamored with things. And that's when stuff goes off the rails. And so the discouragement in the Old Testament over and over again is, if this is the best we can do and it's not enough, what hope do we have? It's interesting, at the end of Proverbs, written by Solomon, he grabs the Proverbs of Agur, a wise man, and Agur is wrestling with, God built society to structure in a way, and if I follow life God's way, I should be thriving, but why is there still injustice? Why are some things unfair? Why do some things not go the way I want? Why is there corruption in all the system? Someone help me understand. And in the midst of it, he says, who has ascended into heaven and descended? What is his name? What is his son's name? He said, I need someone to ultimately explain this to me. Who can go into heaven with God and come down? What's his name? What's his son's name? And that's where Proverbs ends. And it's fascinating all the way into the New Testament. Jesus is sitting with Nicodemus. And Jesus is talking about who he is. And he said, I am the one who has ascended and descended, the Son of Man. And I came to give my life for many. Jesus says, you want to know what wisdom is? Solomon, the Prince of David, whose name Solomon is a derivation of the word shalom, peace. Solomon was the Prince of Peace, and yet he was insufficient. What we needed was the true and better Prince of Peace, Jesus. He said, I'm the one who ascended and descended. I'm not just a king, I'm the King of Kings. And we watched Jesus live the perfect life we could not. He had every right by his own activity to walk into the Holy of Holies. He was righteous before the ark. And yet, he didn't just use us or take the power God gave him, like Philippians says, as a power to be grasped, but he emptied himself and became a servant, serving us even to death on the cross. That he said, I am righteous and holy, but I'm using my righteousness not to condemn you, but to serve you. I will be the sacrifice for you. John the Baptist said, behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. That this man who was holy and righteous, if the wages of sin is death, he never sinned, he didn't deserve to die. So whose death is he taking? Yours and mine. Why did his blood spill? Because he is the true and better sacrifice who covers our sin, so that Hebrews says through the curtain of his body, he can open up a way for you and I to know God again. That the true King of Kings is the true Prince of Peace. He is both the ark and the altar. He brings it together. Righteous and holy in all his activity, and yet through his sacrifice, able to forgive even sinners like you and me. We needed a king like Jesus, and look at how he served us. He did not use his power to exploit or condemn. He used his great godly power to serve us and create a kingdom, a structure where we can flourish. So where's our ultimate hope as individuals? Where's our ultimate hope as a society? It's to be the kings God made you to be over your home, over your apartment, over your family, over your business, over this government, over this world, as significant of the city as this is. But we are meant to be kings that say, I'm not the ultimate arbiter of what is good, righteous, and true. There is a king over all kings I'm accountable to. And he's not here to condemn me. He is here to rescue me and to serve me and to give me the wisdom and skill to serve the people under me, to create a structure where we can flourish. And so friend, if you've never put your faith in Jesus, that's where it starts. I want to be led by the true King of Kings, who's not exploiting me, but serving me so I can live. And then we can live like him. I bow my knee to the King, serving the King of Kings. I ask him for the skill to shepherd his people, to create structures where our neighborhoods can flourish, our families can flourish, our country can flourish. God, let this be. Thank you for giving us hope in the King of Kings, our Lord Jesus.